We all remember Jaden Rashada getting out of his national letter of intent to Florida a little bit, or I think it was a year ago, or year and a half ago rather, when it came to that whole thing happening. Jaden Rashada is claiming that he was essentially Billy Napier, Marcus Castro Walker, former director of player of engagement and NIL, and a high-level booster at Florida, basically were deceptive in saying they were going to give him a certain amount of money. That ended up not happening, but Jaden Rashada's camp is saying this whole thing was deceptive from the jump. So let me give you the spark notes again. Jaden Rashada commits to Miami. Now, the report was that deal for him to commit to Miami was somewhere in the neighborhood of $9.5 million. Florida's like, hey, we got to get this guy in the boat here. We got to make sure we lock down our quarterback by any means necessary. The report is that he signed a deal for 13, give or take, $1.5 million to commit and flip to Florida, with a signing bonus baked in there of a smooth $500,000. So that payment is due on December 5th. Payment ends up never hitting. 2 days later, the collective ends up telling Jaden Rashada, hey, here's the deal, via a written letter, apparently. They tell him this contract is now terminated. Get to National Signing Day. There's still no payment. Jaden Rashada's holding out on signing day, and we're kind of all sitting here as we are watching the letters of intent roll in, and we're still haven't heard anything from Jaden Rashada. Still no graphic from Florida football on Twitter saying, yep, Jaden Rashada signed, sealed, delivered, he's there. Eventually he does sign his letter, but what was going on behind closed doors is Jaden Rashada's like, hey, I haven't seen any money. What's the deal here? And the way that this report reads is that Billy Napier spoke to Jaden Rashada allegedly and said, hey, our alumni, our boosters, they're good for it. We're going to get you $1 million. And eventually that, didn't happen. So the whole thing sort of fell apart from there, and we kind of arrived at where we are currently with Jaden Rashada getting out of his letter of intent. He then goes to Arizona State. He's now transferred to Georgia, and it's a little bit funny how this whole script reads now that he's at Georgia and he's suing individuals that are involved with the rival school of the Florida Gators. So again, this article, I just gave you the Spark Notes version very loosely, very broadly. The full in-depth article is over at on3.com from Pete Nakos, doing the Lord's work on this whole thing. So we got the article there, but also let's bring on the man who actually wrote the freaking article, who's been ahead of this thing really since the jump. That is Portal Pete, but, he's more than just the portal. He's Pete Nakos covering all things college sports. Pete, this was a bombshell this morning, man. How did I do on the Spark Notes there? Anything I missed in terms of bringing us up to speed on this whole situation with Jaden Rashada now suing 3 individuals more or less involved with Florida?
I thought you did a killer job on the Spark Notes, JD. But just some broad strokes that I wanted to mention right off the bat is this is really an unprecedented moment, you could say, in college sports in terms of an athlete suing a head football coach at a major SEC school over a disputed NIL contract. And really what this is going to end up boiling down to when it comes to Billy Napier, and I know that's where a lot of the interest is that National Signing Day, December 21, I believe, 2022. The lawsuit lays out that there are some reassurances that if Jaden Rashada signed with Florida, he would receive $1 million. And there were some reassurances of that through text messages. Supposedly, we don't see any text messages or anything like that. There is a text message, I believe, from Jaden Rashada's father, Harlan Rashada, where he says that Coach Napier, as he refers to him, I believe, assured that he would receive a $1 million wire transfer if he signed with them on National Signing Day. And obviously, as the lawsuit lays out, he allegedly never received that payment.
You and I were texting before this, and you're like, hey, get ready. We're going to use allegedly a lot here, because there is sort of a feeling for me here we're getting one side of the story from Jaden Rashada's camp, and they obviously, if all this ends up being true, have a very real case to be made here against, the individuals that they're making a case against. But are we going to get, you think, like another side of this story from, I don't want to mention Florida explicitly because it's not the university, but from the individuals involved with Florida from this case?
Yeah, I already just got a statement because I was late. I got a statement from the Miami booster, John Ruiz, who denied that he signed the $9.5 million deal with Jaden Rashada. So that's definitely going to be one of the first of many statements, I believe. And Haven't heard anything yet from Billy Napier. Would assume we're going to hear something. Talk to a source in the last 25 minutes. The 3 defendants have not been served just yet, but that's expected to happen shortly, and maybe that'll get the ball rolling. I can't predict to you how this lawsuit's going to go. I know I've personally had a lot of people ask me that question this morning. The one thing that I can say is that this is going to be a lot of he said, and he said, and I think that's going to play out fairly publicly through statements and things like that.
Yeah, you kind of just alluded to it. Like, I think every college football fan is saying, okay, crazy legal thing happening. If you're a Florida fan, crazy legal thing happening with our head coach. And there's this thought now, it's like, okay, well, how much could Billy Napier be on the hook here for? Like, is it a thing where it becomes ugly enough where Florida and Billy Napier have to part ways? Is it not quite that serious because it's not on the, a specific to his football team, with him actually being on the roster kind of situation? Like, it all feels very murky. What are we really talking about here with Billy Napier and the potential consequences? Allegedly, again, keyword allegedly there.
Yeah, we go back to that National Signing Day I was talking about when we jumped on. That is going to really be the focal point, I think, when it comes to Billy Napier. And is there any evidence that proves that Billy Napier said that? I assume that there will be some sort of depositions or things like that where Billy Napier will be asked that question. And I think we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But I think from the lawsuit that we saw and read today, there are not any specific text messages from Billy Napier included in that lawsuit or any phone calls in that lawsuit that show the evidence that Billy Napier said that. Obviously, the lawsuit allegedly says that he made those promises. So I think that is really going to be where the attention goes. I know that everybody has questions about what it means for Billy Napier now and in the near future. I don't have that answer. What I will say is what I wrote in the article, that it is a pivotal year for Billy Napier at Florida. We all know that. That's not a secret. And I guess we have to see how this plays out. This Jaden Rashada thing has definitely been kind of hanging over Florida now, though, for about 13 months. I think that's fair to say, and we've known about it. I've known that this lawsuit has been in the works now for almost a year, actually more than a year. They wanted to file this before he ever actually landed at Arizona State, but took some time, and now here we are. The other thing that's really interesting to me, JD, is Hugh Hathcock's company, Velocity Automotive, is mentioned in this. Some legal jargon here, but he's actually sold that company from now on. Andy Staples made a good point on today's show that we did real quick, that adding Velocity to the lawsuit could maybe point that they're hoping to get to a settlement, because obviously Velocity's in new hands and probably doesn't want to be dragged through this. But the way the contract was initially set up with the Florida-centric NIL collective, the Gator collective, was Hathcock was going to pay wire transfer some money from his Gator Guard collective and also this automotive company. So that's kind of why that company is tied into all this.
There's so many moving pieces, and it feels like we don't even have all the pieces just yet from the other side of things. What is the next step in this story, Pete? Is it depositions? Is it statements? Like, what's the next thing we can look for here in this whole saga?
The most immediate thing we're going to see is statements from the defendants at some point. I can't tell you when it's going to happen. I can tell you that we have attempted to get in contact with Billy Napier and his agent, Jimmy Sexton. We've also reached out to the Florida Athletic Department, Marcus Castro Walker, and that's where we're at right now. There's also another person mentioned in the lawsuit, Jen Grosso, who helped craft the contract through the Gator Collective, and I know Andy Staples has been in contact with her as well. So trying the best we can to try to gather some comments and see where we move from here. But past the statement, the barrage of statements we're about to go through, I would imagine the next 72 hours, I think they're going to have to hire attorneys, and then we're obviously going to have start seeing some court dates probably show up on the docket. I imagine a few things that were mentioned in this lawsuit, the defendants will want dismissed and things like that, and that's really when the ball will start getting rolling.
And I want to go back to something you said in your previous answer. This has been a long time coming, because I think the average college football fan will see, okay, Georgia quarterback is suing current head coach at Florida. Must be a thing where the dogs has something to do with this. But it was like, no, hey, he was trying to get this done before he even got to Arizona State. That's accurate?
That is accurate, yeah. I mean, it's all out in the open now, right? He's being represented by Rusty Hardin, who has represented a slew of really prominent athletes, including like Deshaun Watson, Roger Clemens, Warren Moon. Rusty Hardin has been involved in all this since about January 2023. So, yes, he has been involved, and this has been a long time coming. And obviously, this lawsuit also, when you read through it, I mean, there's a lot of little bits and pieces of evidence that definitely, right, you don't just kind of come up with one day. I mean, that's going to take a while to comb through text messages and things like that.
Sure. Again, well, Pete Nakos has the whole article over at on3.com. Tons of in-depth information there. Go read through that. It's up right now. Anything else to know about this, Pete, before we part ways here? Anything else that you want to make sure the good folks know about this whole situation moving forward?
The one thing I will say that I think a lot of people have questions about is like, okay, so the lawsuit's filed. What does Jaden Rashada want? Well, the lawsuit obviously alleges that he missed out on a $9.5 million deal at Miami because he flipped his commitment from Miami to Florida. And the complaint lays out that he was defrauded by Billy Napier and Marcus Castro Walker and Hugh Hathcock, and that's kind of like where the suit's at. I also would imagine he's suing for punitive damages, which means that he didn't get that $13.85 million deal either. So he's obviously looking for a financial payment at some point, whether that is through a settlement or through a jury or a bench trial.
Great stuff. Again, Pete Nakos. The lower third says Transfer Portal Insider. That's one of the many hats my guy wears, okay? College sports, business, NIL, all of it. He's got you covered, Pete. Great stuff, man. Again, go check out the article if you haven't already. We'll do this again soon. I'm sure we have more layers to this coming, man. So we appreciate you making time.
You bet. Thanks so much, JD.
Again, Pete Nakos. Best in the game, man. Best in the game. Glad he's on our team. I'll say that. I'm glad he's on our team. Things are kind of crazy right now, man. It's a crazy world in college sports. So I wanted to make sure we had Pete Nakos on first to kind of unpack the fundamentals of that whole situation, because there's a lot of legal jargon there, right? There's a lot of specific things around who said what, and Jaden Rashada is alleging this, and a lot of things that are out in the open there that I wanted Pete to kind of unpack for us. But I also want us to just kind of unpack this from a college football perspective, because I think that's what we operate here on this show. That's kind of the business that we're in. If you're a Florida fan, I want to start there. You're thinking this is the last thing that we need. This is the last thing that we need, because there was already this feeling going into the season of everybody versus Florida versus the timeline. You got former head coaches and Steve Spurrier saying that he wishes things were more tidy under Billy Napier. You got Princely Umanmielen transferring to another school within your conference, talking about the development that he's getting at Ole Miss that he wasn't getting at Florida. Like, there's just been this consistent just punching bag that Florida has been in the news over the course of this past offseason. And then you put on top of that the fact that it is a pivotal year for Billy Napier, and they do have a schedule that resembles the Hunger Games. And so all these things are adding up to where you're just like, golly, man, can we just get to the season? And this is something that has nothing to do even with what's going on the field at Florida. This is something that happened from a recruiting and NIL perspective. And so Billy Napier, man, like, this is just more ammo to the folks that are not fans of his. This is another opportunity for them to throw shade and another opportunity for them to try and make a move to make moves at that head coaching spot if that's not the guy that you want running the show. Now, that's the college football point of things if you're a Florida fan. If you're Jaden Rashada, personally, like, if what he is alleging is true, and that's a very big if, I want us to make sure we say that. If what he's saying is true and all those things end up being factual, it's hard to blame the guy. Like, there's nothing negative you can say about Jaden Rashada in this situation. And I think that the first thing that people will object to with this whole thing around Jaden Rashada is, well, the kid's money hungry. The kid's just out here to make a quick buck. $13.85 million. You really need that kind of money as a high school senior? And I'm sitting here saying, yeah, that's a ridiculous amount of money, but if I signed a document that you're going to pay me that amount of money, then what's the problem here? Jaden Rashada is not at fault here. Whoever is at fault is who didn't allow this whole thing to go through or who didn't carry through on their responsibility to get this money to my guy. You messed with my guy's life. That's really what it comes down to. You mess with Jaden Rashada's life, because if it were going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of that $9.5 million to go to Miami, that's life-changing money. Okay, that is life-changing. You live differently every single day from there on out with that kind of money, if that's what you make when you go to another school. And so to now have a very different reality at an NIL standpoint, you feel for Jaden Rashada. You feel for Jaden Rashada. And I think as a player, like we said this whenever he transferred to Arizona State, I just want us to be at a point in the college football public where when we talk about Jaden Rashada, we talk about him as a player. Because right now you hear Jaden Rashada and your mind goes immediately to this whole situation around Florida and the very public NIL breakup they had over his letter of intent. And you think about that whole disaster. Guy's still a really good football player. He was a 4-star out of high school. He's got a really talented arm. Like, this dude can be something at the collegiate ranks if he's able to just get this behind him. So you hate this is now more headlines for him, more headlines around this situation. But at the same time, you're like, that's not a small dollar figure that you were promised, allegedly. So we'll see how this whole thing plays out. We want to, again, not speak too quickly or hammer anybody too quickly. But when we talk about the whole thing around Billy Napier, I think that's where this whole situation gets very interesting. Because I'm really not sure what to make of the responsibility you allocate to Billy Napier. Because on one hand, I'm like, NIL is a new thing for the most part, especially when this whole situation went down. If you're the head coach, are you really dealing specifically in the exact amounts and the contracts and all those things that players are potentially getting? I'd have to imagine not. But at the same time, if you're the head coach of your organization, you are the CEO. You are in charge of everything. And when you have that kind of responsibility, everything that doesn't go right also falls on your shoulders as well. And so even if Billy Napier didn't execute the contract or didn't, have this master plan to try and mess with Jaden Rashada and deceive him, which I would, again, just personally believe that will be the statement that he comes out and makes, that there are parts of this story that are false. Whether they are or not, that's, I believe, what's going to be the statement. It's still something that falls on you as a head coach. So does it have anything to do with what happens on Saturdays and how you are as a play caller and how you are when you put your roster together? No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. But I do think the responsibility, when you wear that head coach name tag, stuff like this falls on your plate. So are there growing pains in everything, especially when NIL is so new? Of course, but this is some very serious accusations being levied by Jaden Rashada's camp, and we're going to give you more opinions as we get more information on it. But as it sits right here for Jaden Rashada, just looking forward to the point in time where we can talk about what he's doing on the field as opposed to this whole situation. But personally, yeah, if I were promised $13+ million and I didn't get it, I'd probably take some sort of legal action too. It is what it is. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.